So I just saw Avengers Endgame, and it wasn't great. And that's not to say that there weren't great moments, scenes, or sequences. There's a decent amount that I really enjoyed about this movie. But unfortunately, about 2 hours of this 3-hour-long film were either frustrating or boring. If what you're looking to get out of this movie is an exciting, climactic fight scene packaged along with a proper send-off to the events that have been building up over so many years, then great. In that sense, this movie definitely delivered. But what I'd like you to keep in mind when watching this review is that there is also another 2+ hours to this movie. This is a movie that will likely leave people exhilarated and satisfied from what they had just witnessed before leaving the theater, but I am judging this movie as the entire movie, and there's a lot of irritating bullshit that takes place before any of that. Now, for context, I actually really enjoyed Infinity War. I bought it on 4K Blu-ray, and I rewatched it the night before seeing this film, and I could honestly even watch it for a third time at some point. One of the bigger reasons as to why I was able to enjoy Infinity War so much is that it didn't waste any time. There wasn't much filler, everything moved along, and most of what was shown felt purposeful, but unfortunately, I cannot say that at all about this movie. There is a lot of wasted time in this movie just spent dicking around. A significant portion of the movie was spent referencing the previous films to offer nothing more than just fan service, I guess. And yeah, I guess there's a lot of people out there that want nothing more out of a film than just to be shown member berries. I mean, if that wasn't the case, then Disney wouldn't be making so many live-action remakes right now. Either way, this movie did not need to be 3 hours long. The aspects to the film that I did enjoy were the production design, the special effects, and the music. Most of the acting served its purpose. Some lines of dialogue were well written, and others were unbearably cheesy and forced. And that's about it, I guess. So to further illustrate my frustrations with the film, I guess I have to go into spoiler talk now. If you don't want to hear spoilers for this movie, click to this part in the video. There's your warning. 3, 2, 1. So basically what happens is that the remaining Avengers track down Thanos to get the stones so that they can bring everybody back, but it turns out that Thanos already destroyed the stones, so they kill him. 5 years later, the Avengers decide that they need to build a time machine so that they can get the Infinity Stones and bring everyone back. Personally, I can suspend my disbelief for the Infinity Stones being able to manipulate time and reality and so on. They're basically just these ancient magic things that we don't understand, but now they just build a time machine, and it didn't even seem like Tony Stark took very long at all to figure out how to do it. Unfortunately, whenever this kind of concept is introduced in movies like these, it winds up creating an entire chasm of logical issues. The only two movies I can think of that, to the best of my understanding, don't contradict their own rules regarding time travel are 12 Monkeys and Primer. And this film certainly did a much better job than most in that sense, but it still opened itself up to a wide array of nonsense. The way they describe how their time machine works is that if you go back into the past and change something, it will not affect the future that you go back to. So by changing something, you are essentially creating a new timeline that will continue to take place off-screen once you've left it. Not exactly sure how they arrived at that conclusion so confidently, especially considering that's not how the time stone works. Basically, they just needed an excuse as to why they couldn't go back in time and kill Thanos as a baby, and that's fine and all, but now it means that we're dealing with several different timelines, and I'd like you to keep that in mind as I go on. So the Avengers split into 4 different groups to go to 4 different points in time so that they can collect all of the Infinity Stones. Before they do that, they have to collect all of the different Avengers that have been doing their own thing for the past 5 years. We get a really weird and out-of-place scene showing Hawkeye assassinating people in Japan. We also see that Thor has gotten fat drinking beer and playing video games. I really wish that they added some weight to his face and not just his torso, because with his face looking exactly the same as it did before, it really just looks like he's wearing a fake fat suit. Anyway, they assemble the remaining Avengers and strategically plan out what points in time they're going to travel to get the Infinity Stones, but they need an excuse as to why the characters only have one chance at doing it. So Ant-Man explains that the only person that can create the particles that they're using to time travel with is a person that got Thanos. He's not around anymore, so this is a finite resource, and that's the reason why we can only do this once. And despite how supposedly thoroughly they planned out this entire expedition, not one of them, including the billionaire genius that created this time machine, thought to go back in time and get more. You can clearly carry things back with you to your current timeline. I mean, the whole point is that you're trying to get the Infinity Stones, right? And if by going back and changing something means creating a new timeline, then theoretically you have an infinite amount of this finite resource. But nope, nobody thinks about that, and they they decide to go on with their incredibly risky plan. Nebula and War Machine travel back to 2014 to get the Power Stone on planet Morag, and I guess this time machine also doubles as a device that can teleport you to a different planet, and that's not really a big issue at all. My issue is that when they get there, Nebula's like, hey, watch out, we're not the only ones looking for the Power Stone here. And War Machine's like, what do you mean? And she explains that 2014 Thanos is also there looking for it, along with 2014 Gamora and 2014 herself. I'm sorry, but why didn't you communicate this to anyone before you went there? How long did you guys spend calculating the precise points in time that you should go to collect each of the stones? Perhaps if you had added that fucking Thanos would be there, then they might have sent more than just 2 of you. Anyway, Thanos figures out that they're there pretty quickly. Basically, because Nebula is cybernetic, her network interferes with the 2014 version of Nebula, and Thanos is able to see all of the current-day Nebula's memories and recorded conversations of the Avengers talking about how Thanos destroyed the world and how they should go back in time and try to stop him and steal the stones. Again, this easily could have been prevented if you had just told anybody that you knew Thanos was going to be here before you got sent back in time. They could have sent someone else, they could have wiped your memory or something, maybe. I don't know how that shit works. So Nebula and War Machine steal the Power Stone, and just as they're about to go back to the current timeline, Thanos fucks with Nebula in a way that makes her fall over, and then she's like, oh shit, he knows we're here. But War Machine doesn't know this because this happened a millisecond after he actually went back to the correct timeline. Kinda convenient that Nebula gave the stone to him right before this happened instead of continuing to hold it herself. Either way, there's no real reason why she can't just press the button on her suit right after she discovers this. Like, oh no, Thanos knows we're here. So what? It's a different timeline. Just go back to the future and it won't matter. Nothing that you change in the past will affect the timeline that you return to, so just get the fuck out of there. But of course she doesn't, and she gets captured, and Thanos pulls the old switcheroo and sends 2014 Nebula back, who is still loyal to him. Meanwhile, Thor and Rocket spend as long as possible obtaining the Reality Stone. Hulk, Ant-Man, Captain America, and Iron Man travel back to 2012 during the fight scene of the first Avengers to get 3 other stones. And this entire sequence is just references and fan service that I don't really care about. They fail at getting one of the stones, so Iron Man and Captain America use their suits to go back to the 70s to get it. Anyway, during all of this, Hawkeye and Black Widow have traveled to 2014 Vormir to get the Soul Stone, at which point they learn that in order to obtain it, you have to sacrifice something you love. This is yet another huge and important factor that Nebula was already aware of and decided not to tell anyone about. Nebula already understood that you needed to trade a soul for a soul in order to get the Soul Stone. Why didn't she warn them? Perhaps they could have planned this out better. Anyway, there's this huge attempt at an emotional scene where the 2 of them are arguing over who should kill themselves, but the entire emotional weight of this scene is completely reliant on the audience members being able to understand that the death will be permanent, which was never communicated before this point. It's only at the end of the film when Hulk says that he tried to bring her back when he used the Infinity Stones but couldn't that we realize that this is the case. And at that point, I guess I can be okay with the idea that the stone won't let you bring back the person that was sacrificed to get it, but since those rules were never really communicated, I unfortunately wasn't really able to take that dramatic scene seriously. I mean, their entire goal was to use the Infinity Stones to bring other people back, so the entire time they were fighting, all I could think was, no one's ever really gone. Perhaps if I had read all the comics beforehand, then I would understand every single rule to how the Infinity Stones work, but I did not. Also, they clearly said that you have to sacrifice something that you love in order to get the stone, but that's not really what suicide is it? He didn't really sacrifice her, she just kicked herself off the cliff. I mean, I guess you could argue that he let go of his grip as soon as she did that, but I find it funny to imagine that if Hawkeye actually succeeded in running off the cliff while she was on the ground before she caught him, then maybe it wouldn't have worked. Like, oh yeah, I guess they did say that you have to sacrifice something you love and not just witness your friend kill themselves. Oops. Anyway, they take all the Infinity Stones to the future, and then the Hulk uses them to snap people back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity. The get people back that Thanos killed, and I really like how it was presented in this scene. It easily could have shown everybody just popping back into existence, and that would have been pretty cheesy, but instead we hear a phone vibrating, and then we see that it's Hawkeye's wife calling him. It was really well done and pretty effectively emotional, I think. Meanwhile, the 2014 evil Nebula sneaks away and sticks her mechanical fingers into the time machine thing and creates a portal that brings Thanos there. So 2014 Nebula has the ability to stick her fingers fingers inside the time machine and open up a portal and bring a gigantic ship from another timeline here, does that not imply that current Nebula is able to do that as well? Why didn't she just do that with the Infinity Stones? Does this mean that she could just bring back Black Widow if she really wanted to? If she can stick her fingers in the time machine and open up a portal to bring things from other timelines right there, why didn't she do that? This doesn't make any sense. So now Thanos' ship is right above the Avengers headquarters and he aims his missiles and blows it to smithereens. And Ant-Man gets a missile fired pretty much directly at him as he's looking out the window. So now the entire Avengers headquarters is absolutely decimated, and at this point I expected there to be some casualties. I mean, with some of the actors' contracts ending, I knew some of them would die, and it seemed like this might be the point, but everybody miraculously survived and just fell through the floor being trapped under rubble. I'm sorry, but some of you don't even have real superpowers. How did all of you survive? Let alone there being no missing limbs or broken bones or anything. That was a little weird. By this point, my experience watching the film had improved significantly, mostly because things were actually happening. The whole time travel heist sequence felt like it went on forever, so I was glad for things to actually be moving along. We get a nice fight scene between Thanos and the original Avengers, and then all of the Avengers that died in the last movie show up through some portals courtesy of Doctor Strange. For me, this was a very entertaining and satisfying sequence overall, although it was really weird when Ant-Man was trying to fire up his time machine van in the middle of the battle. So at this point, Captain Marvel comes back, and she had been away for 90% of the movie, and that probably made the movie better because she is an incredibly boring and uninteresting character. But I kind of wish they had waited until after this film to bring her into this cinematic universe, because even though she wasn't in this movie much, it still wound up hurting the film. For the first 10 minutes of this movie, I forgot that she was even gonna be in it, but then she showed up and I was like, oh yeah. I just wish there was more to her character than just, she's really strong. When she fights Thanos at the end of the film, it just seems as though they're making shit up as they go along. There's points in the fight where she's really powerful against Thanos, and there's other points where he throws her away with ease. She's the most powerful thing in the universe, but she's weak whenever the movie needs her to be. Watching everybody else fight was pretty entertaining, but whenever she was involved, it was a lot less interesting. And it doesn't help when you consider the fact that she could just fly out into the atmosphere at any moment. I mean, that would be the easiest way for you to ensure that Thanos is not able to use the gauntlet, right? Why not just fly away with the gauntlet? I thought you could do that. You already destroyed his ship and he can't fly. Why don't you just get the fuck out of there? Did the movie forget she could do that? Anyway, the majority of this sequence was well presented, and obviously it ends with Iron Man sacrificing himself. But I do feel as though Thanos' presence as a villain was a little weak in this movie. I mean, he's the 2014 version, so he doesn't even really understand anything that's going on. I feel like it would have been more impactful for me if Thanos actually had a history with these characters. He doesn't even know who they are, so it's basically like he's just fighting random people. Anyway, after the battle, we see all of the characters at a memorial for Tony Stark, and I was really itching to see more emotion out of these characters, but instead they were all just somberly looking at the ground or out into the distance. And yeah, I get that this film is trying to present all of these characters as strong individuals, but you'd think that at least his young daughter would be crying or something, but she doesn't really show any emotion at all, which wasn't really surprising because she didn't really do a great job in any of the previous scenes either. This is unfortunately another one of those hiring a kid because they're cute instead of hiring a kid because they can act things. Anyway, at the end of the movie, they decide to return all of the Infinity Stones back from where they found them, because earlier they learned that taking an Infinity Stone from a timeline will cause some very bad things to happen in that timeline. So they send Captain America back by himself with all 6 Infinity Stones in a briefcase. Wouldn't you want to send more than just one guy? It wasn't that much earlier in the film when Iron Man said, hey, if you mess with time, sometimes time will mess back. And you guys really didn't even understand how Thanos showed up out of nowhere and destroyed your whole headquarters. Might you want to take a minor precaution here and not just have all 6 Infinity Stones being sent back with one person? The guy who makes the particles is unsnapped. It's not like there's a finite resource to be able to go back or anything. Also, you took these stones from 4 different timelines, and yet Captain America manages to return them by going back once? It would make a lot more sense if he time traveled with one stone and then came back and then took another stone and time traveled again, because there is no timeline in which all 6 stones are missing. Those are 4 completely different timelines, and the film never once addressed this despite it being an inevitability based on the rules that they set up. Instead, they act like he's just going into the past. If you just go into the past without going to a specific timeline, then none of the stones will be missing and there's no point returning them. Because as the film itself stated, it doesn't change the timeline you're in. So in your past, those stones are not missing. That was the entire justification for why they couldn't kill Thanos as a baby. So anyway, Captain America's supposed to return back to this platform after 5 seconds, but he doesn't. They start wondering where he is, and then they look over by the water and he's just sitting on a bench, but he's really, really old. Turns out he stayed in the past and decided to experience life and love. He's an old man who's fulfilled with experiencing his life, and he's very happy. Now, when I saw the film, my first thought was, why didn't he warp back to the platform? I thought you needed the platform to warp back from the past. But I am now realizing that he didn't warp back at all, and the film is implying that he stayed in the past up until that point and then just decided to sit down and surprise everybody. But wouldn't he be in a completely different timeline? If he goes back to the past, he won't just show up in the same timeline again, right? If he had warped back to the platform as an old man and was like, yeah, I decided to live my life and be happy and now I'm back, that would have made a lot more sense. But apparently he went back to the past and stayed in the same timeline somehow? Doesn't that completely contradict the entire movie? That was your entire justification for why they couldn't just kill Thanos as a baby. I don't know, call me crazy, but I feel as though whenever you put time machines into movies that you're supposed to take seriously, it just winds up making them a bit silly. And let's not forget that there are now time machines that exist in this universe. Everything that takes place after this movie will be in a universe with time machines. Anyway, if you couldn't tell, I don't hate this movie at all. Sure, most of it left me either frustrated or bored, but there were some very satisfying sequences and I don't regret watching it. I think it's safe to say that above all else, this movie is made for the fans. If you are already seriously invested in this whole franchise, then you will likely love this movie. Half of the movie is basically just fan service, so that's pretty much expected. But as someone that doesn't consider myself to be a Marvel fan, this didn't really work well as a standalone film. To me, this was not as good as Infinity War, but certainly not as bad as Captain Marvel. To all of the billions of people that loved this movie, I'm really glad you did, and I hope that me expressing my opinion on why I didn't enjoy it as much as you is something that you can be okay with. And I'm giving this one a 5 out of 10.